By the time Etta James walked out of that room, she had just turned down the most dangerous offer of her career. She didn't know then how dangerous it really was. Years later, watching the news, she finally understood what she had walked away from. It was 1960. Ike Turner was not yet the name the world would later come to know in the way it came to know it. He was something more specific than famous. He was powerful. In the clubs and recording studios that ran along the spine of American rhythm and blues, Ike Turner was the man who could make a career happen overnight. He played with ruthless precision, on guitar, on piano, and in every negotiation he entered. He ran his band the way some men run a business and others run a country, with total control, with no exceptions. By 1960, he had already found a young woman named Anna Mae Bullock in a St. Louis club. She had walked to the microphone on a dare. By the time the song ended, Ike Turner had already decided she belonged to him. What most people don't know is that before Anna Mae became Tina, Ike Turner had his eye on someone else entirely. Etta James was 22 years old in 1960, and she was already more than most artists twice her age would ever become. Chess Records had her on contract. At Last was on the radio. Her voice was in living rooms and diners and car speakers from Chicago to New Orleans. But being on the radio and controlling your own future are two entirely different things. Etta James had a voice that could stop a room. What she didn't have, not yet, was the machinery around her to protect what that voice was worth. The music business of that era was full of men who looked at talent the way a jeweler looks at an uncut stone. The value was obvious. The question was always, who would end up controlling it? Ike Turner had been paying attention to Etta James for some time. He had heard At Last. He had heard the live recordings. He had heard what people said about her in rooms she wasn't in. And sometime in the spring of 1960, he decided to arrange a meeting. He framed it as professional courtesy, a conversation between artists. Etta agreed to come. She didn't yet know what kind of conversation it was going to be. The meeting was arranged through a mutual acquaintance, a session player who moved between labels and knew everyone, and the message passed to Etta's people was simple. Ike Turner would like to sit down. He had something to discuss. It would be worth her time. The word used was opportunity. She arrived at the appointed place, a back room in a St. Louis club on a Tuesday afternoon, in a dark dress with her hair pinned up and her instincts already telling her something her mind hadn't yet caught up to. Ike Turner was already there when she arrived, seated at a small table, a glass of water in front of him, no paperwork visible. Etta would later say that was the first thing she noticed. A man who wants to discuss a collaboration brings documents. A man who wants to discuss something else entirely sits with his hands on the table and waits. He stood when she came in. He smiled. He was, by every account of the people who encountered him in that era, extraordinarily charming when he chose to be. That afternoon he chose to be. He gestured to the chair across from him and waited for her to sit. He told her she was the most important voice in rhythm and blues. Not one of the most important, the most important. He said it the way a man says something he has practiced enough times that it sounds like it just arrived. Etta thanked him. She was not immune to the compliment. No one would have been, at 22, hearing it from a man with his track record. But she had also been in enough rooms with enough men who led with flattery to know that the flattery was never the point. She waited. Ike talked about the music business, the state of it, the direction it was moving, the gap between artists who made money for other people and artists who built something that would last. He said the word control 14 times in 30 minutes. Etta would count them later, turning the conversation over in her mind on the drive back. 14 times. Control of the sound, control of the stage, control of the money, control of the image. What he didn't say, not yet, was who would be doing the controlling. And then he told her what he actually wanted. He wanted Etta James to join his review, not as a featured guest, not as a one-off collaboration, as the centerpiece, as the voice around which he would build the next chapter of everything he was doing. He described it in careful, specific terms: the touring schedule, the production, the reach into markets that Chess Records wasn't getting her into, the money, which was real, and which was more than what she was currently seeing from Chess. What Ike Turner was offering Etta James in that back room on a Tuesday afternoon was the chance to become the biggest act in American music. He said he could make it happen within 18 months. He had done it before, with other artists, in other rooms. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Not a full contract, a term sheet, the kind of document designed to make something feel preliminary and safe when it was neither. And Etta James looked at that piece of paper for a long moment. What she was looking for wasn't the numbers. She was looking for the thing the numbers were hiding. She read it twice. The language was clean, the offer was generous, and the control structure was total. Every creative decision, every performance decision, every financial decision run through one office, one man. Etta James had grown up without protection. She had navigated Chess Records at 22 with nothing but her voice and her instincts. She had been in rooms where men decided things about her without consulting her, and she had learned, not from advice, not from a mentor, but from the specific education of being on the receiving end of that treatment, what certain kinds of generosity actually cost. She looked up from the paper. Ike was watching her read with the expression of a man who has watched many people read many documents and has learned to gauge from their face how the next 60 seconds will go. What Etta James said next is the reason this story has never fully been told. Because what she said was not no, not immediately. She asked him one question. She asked, "Who decides when I leave?" The room was quiet for a moment. Ike Turner had not been asked that before, not in those words, not with that directness, not by someone sitting across from him who was not yet afraid of him. He smiled. He said the question didn't work that way, that this was a partnership, that the structure existed to protect everyone involved, that the artists who stayed were the ones who understood what the structure was really for. And Etta James understood exactly what the structure was really for. She picked up the term sheet. She folded it once, carefully, along its center crease. She placed it back on the table in front of him. She said, "I appreciate the offer." Then she stood up, picked up her coat, and walked toward the door. Ike Turner did not try to stop her. Men like him rarely did in moments like that. There would be other conversations, other rooms, other women. Etta James walked out of that St. Louis club on a Tuesday afternoon and did not look back. She didn't tell her manager what had been offered. She didn't tell anyone for years. In the months that followed, Etta James watched from a distance as Ike Turner's review grew into exactly what he had described it could become. The shows got bigger. The reach expanded. The money was real. And at the center of it, a young woman named Anna Mae Bullock, now performing as Tina Turner, was becoming something extraordinary. Something extraordinary inside a situation that was becoming something else entirely. Etta saw it from the outside, the way you see something from outside when you know what you walked away from. She watched the performances. She heard the records. She saw the talent, which was undeniable. And she saw, in the careful way Tina moved through interviews, in the things she didn't say when reporters asked the wrong questions, something Etta recognized. The structure Ike had described in that back room on a Tuesday afternoon, she saw what it was actually protecting, and what it was not. It was 1978 when the full story of what had been happening inside Ike and Tina Turner's marriage finally became impossible to contain. The accounts came out slowly at first, then all at once, the way these things do when enough time has passed and enough damage has been done. Etta James heard it the way most people heard it, through the news, through interviews, through the specific horror of realizing that what you suspected from the outside was a fraction of what was actually happening inside. She didn't talk about the Tuesday afternoon then. It wasn't the time. It wasn't her story to make about herself. But she thought about it. She thought about the term sheet folded once along its center crease. She thought about the question she had asked. Who decides when I leave? And the answer she had received. She thought about what it means to walk into a room and trust what you feel before you fully understand what you're feeling. That is a skill nobody teaches you. You earn it the hard way, or you don't have it at all. Tina Turner survived. She more than survived. She rebuilt everything on her own terms, and what she built in the second half of her career stands as one of the most remarkable comebacks in the history of popular music. But Etta James knew, quietly, privately, in the way you know things you've never had to say out loud, that the version of her story that almost happened in a St. Louis back room on a Tuesday afternoon would have had a different ending. In an interview she gave in the early 2000s, a journalist asked Etta James about the secret of her longevity in the music business. She thought for a moment before answering. She said, "I always knew which doors to walk through and which ones to walk away from." She never explained what she meant by that. She didn't need to. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. What would you have done in that room? Because there are more stories where this one came from, and every one of them deserves to be told.